Ladies and gentlemen, I am Jared LeMay, and this is the Good Roads Podcast. All right, I'm going to dive right in today with today's topic. With the broad reach and general anonymity of the internet, it was only a matter of time before people began using it with malicious intent. With the ability to reach a great many people with minimal cost and effort, scams have been ramping up not only in complexity, but also in quantity. And with our lives becoming ever more intertwined in the digital world, these scams are getting more frequent and wider ranging, not only to us at home, but to the places we work and the municipalities we serve. In the past few years, we've heard a bunch of grand-scale cyber attacks, such as the American petroleum pipeline that was held under ransomware. But even in our own backyards, municipalities have been targeted and defrauded. The city of Ottawa was hit with a phishing scam to the tune of $128,000. St. Mary's, Ontario was caught up with ransomware that locked and copied key pieces of data that could have contained identifying information. Even here at the Good Roads office, we occasionally get phishing scams to send iTunes gift cards to random email addresses. So on today's episode, I'm very happy to have, during Cybersecurity Awareness Month, as luck would have it, Lisa Plaggemier, the Executive Director of the National Cybersecurity Alliance, to discuss the hows, whys, and protection from cyber attacks. Thanks for joining us today, Lisa. I know it must be an especially busy time being Cybersecurity Awareness Month.
Yeah, it is. It is. But thanks for having me. I'm happy to be here.
Oh, fantastic. It's good to have another expert to discuss this with. Defrauding people, especially through technical means, is one of my pet peeves. Having a technical background, it just drives me absolutely insane. But let's dive right in. I'm going to get right into the nitty gritty right off the bat. And I want to start with the how, because if anybody takes anything away from this, if they shut off this podcast right away, I want them to know what they're looking for in terms of how this fraud is committed and to sort of set off those red flags. So right from the beginning, people usually think of cybercrime as somebody in a dank, dark basement, black screen with green text and type away. And in TV shows where you've got one hacker facing another. But
That's not it at all.
no, not at all. Hacking is a lot more different than that and a lot more people oriented, as we're going to get into. But through some of the hows, you can see how this is more people oriented. The main type of scam is called phishing with a PH at the start. Do you want to go over that quickly?
Yeah, I mean, I guess I'll back up a little bit. When you talk about fraud in general or cyber, I would go broader and call it cybercrime.
Okay.
It's based in social engineering. It's
Right.
a lot of folks like to say that the weakest link is the human being.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, I also think the human being has the ability to be your strongest defense as well. We
Right.
just have to pay attention to what we're doing. And unfortunately, the internet was never designed to be secure. It was designed for this open and free flow of information.
Right.
And God bless the folks that worked on it in the early days. They never thought that anybody would use it to do harm. Well, like anything in the world, it doesn't take very long before bad people find out how to use something good to do bad things. So
Unfortunately, yeah.
we've been fighting that ever since. So phishing is just one form of social engineering, just tricking well-intentioned, well-meaning, very intelligent people into doing something they didn't mean to do. So sometimes it looks super obvious, like the old Nigerian prince scams, but more frequently what we see is that because this isn't some hacker in a basement somewhere, this is organized crime. This is the big four. This is Russia, China, North Korea, and Iran. And
Right.
Criminal gangs that often operate in conjunction with the governments of those four countries. So they're using all the same technology that we use in the legitimate world. So you're up against a machine. You're up
Yeah.
against technology. You're up against, they're highly organized. So to make a phishing email these days, they're going to use somebody with marketing skills to build a phishing email that looks, an Amazon delivery notice or a a receipt that you've ordered something online or what have you that looks exactly like the real thing. And it's going to take you to a site that looks really close to the real thing. So, so
With the sheer
it's
game of numbers too,
yeah,
they're gonna eventually hit somebody who's ordered something from that site and
right,
is expecting something, and
yep,
they're gonna walk right into it.
exactly, yeah. So you
Yeah.
have to pay attention. You have to hover over links to see what URL the link is really taking you to. You
Yeah.
have to look at the sender address, pay a lot of attention to that. And in
The
some
sender address is a big
cases,
one too. Yeah.
what's that?
The sender address is
Yeah,
definitely a big one too. I
yeah.
know at the Good Roads office, my immediate red flag is when our executive director sends an email asking me to do a favor for him, and he's never that nice.
Buy some gift cards.
Yeah,
Yeah,
so it's a red flag right there.
yeah,
And then I look at the
yeah.
sender email and it's execdirect@gmail. Well, at Good Roads here, we have an at Good Roads account. But I mean, it can even get a little bit more complicated than that when they replace an O with a zero or an
Right.
L with a capital I.
Or my favorite is an RN for an M. That one can be
Wow.
really hard to see.
That,
Yeah.
yeah,
The other thing we see a lot now is um, one of your maybe somebody in your supply chain or another entity that you do business with in some way, a supplier for something. Maybe they have their email address get compromised, right?
right.
So it's actually a legitimate sender address because it's the person you're used to doing business with, and maybe they're sending you something that you were actually expecting. So I saw this happen at a company I used to work at where we had a customer who had their email box compromised, bad guys in the email box sending our salesperson a fake DocuSign email. And the salesperson was in the sales cycle with that customer and was expecting a contract from them.
Oh, wow.
So
Wow.
sometimes you have to use your spidey senses. Now, I asked him, he clicked on it. I asked him if he was expecting a DocuSign. He said, no, I was actually just expecting a PDF of the signed contract, but I figured maybe the client changed their mind and was using DocuSign. So you kind of have to use your spidey senses and ask yourself, is
Right.
this exactly what I was expecting? Um, and if it
Well, and
doesn't
the other
feel
thing,
right, then you pick up the
the other,
phone and you
yeah.
call.
Well, the other thing too you mentioned there is they asked you about it, or you asked them, and um, double checking with somebody too, like getting another set of eyes on it. Because if you
Yep,
are expecting something
right.
similar to that, I mean, I do that in graphic design all the time. Is I'll work on a file forever, and I'll be so in depth into it, I don't see the little things that pop out. But
Mm-hmm.
somebody who has nothing to do with that email. Um, so yeah, just to circle
Right.
back to all of this, it and you hit the nail on the head right off the bat. This is social engineering, and you can look at it with all of the different types of cyber attacks, from like romance schemes, ransomware. You need somebody to download something, and that
It
encrypts your
usually
entire
comes through
computer.
phishing.
Yeah, exactly. Identity theft, even the more complex digital-driven attacks, such as rats and keyloggers, they require you to download something, which,
Yep.
like you said, goes through phishing. Um, so like you said, it's a huge social engineering component
And you
to it.
might click on something and end up with a keyboard logger being downloaded to your machine. You don't realize it's happening. So
Yes,
very
exactly.
often there's not an immediate sign that you did something wrong. And
Right.
so that's why it's important to tell your IT team, like, I clicked on this thing, I don't think I should have. And they can run scans on your machine and make sure that you don't have a virus or something else bad
Exactly.
happen.
And even for the smaller municipalities, let somebody know. Uh,
Yep,
I mean, for the most part, they have somebody looking after their IT department, their computers, and so on and so forth. Let somebody know that something
right.
may have happened. Um, but with that social engineering, I want to circle back to the cybersecurity attitude and behaviors report that I believe should be out by now. Correct?
Yes, it's called O Behave, and the 2022 version is just been released. And this year, so last year we surveyed 1,000 people in the U.S. and 1,000 people in the U.K., and this year we added 1,000 people in Canada. So you can see
Fantastic.
how you compare to two of the other
So,
five eyes, as we like to say.
with that being available, I'll forward that on in the show notes and everything like that. But With this report, what can you tell me about people's general attitude towards cybersecurity?
People are a little bit frustrated and a little bit intimidated, and I think we only have ourselves to blame. Well, and I'll blame the media a little bit too for the
Yeah.
intimidation factor. And it's because of that image that you talked about earlier that people conjure up in their heads. Very frequently, when we hear about a data breach or a security incident, and it makes the news, the evening news. Um, it tends to be kind of sensationalized, and they won't really talk about the root cause. Normally, you don't know the root cause immediately when it happens.
Right.
Um, and they'll show, even though they might, be interviewing a talking head or somebody like me or a security professional about whatever it is that happened. At some point, they overlay that person's voice with pictures of a hacker in a hoodie, or the close up of
Yeah.
fingers on a keyboard, or a close up of a motherboard, or a server room, or other things that just to the average human look pretty intimidating.
Right.
So I think we kind of got what we asked for. We in the security community for too long we've used fear to try and get people to kind of pay attention and maybe change their behavior a little bit, and so now people are afraid. So that doesn't translate into behavior change. That
No.
I'm an ex-advertising person and marketing person. My formative career years were spent at Ford Motor Company, and I like to joke that if fear worked as a motivator, all the ads that we see on television would be scary.
Right.
But
Yeah.
it
No,
doesn't
that's
work.
true.
It's not a good. Uh, it doesn't inspire people to have lasting behavior change, to actually take action. So
No, they
things
just want
like
it fixed now.
there are so many simple things that people can do. Things like not using the same password for multiple accounts, things like that. Using multi-factor authentication, things like that are really important and can go a
Yeah.
long, long, long way to protect you and your organization. But if you're too busy being afraid and frustrated, then you're not
Right.
going to do those things. So um, we've we're taking a different tack this October, and we're talking about peace of mind and how much better you can feel if you do these things, and how quick
Okay.
and easy some of them are.
And that's the thing, behavior modification and quick and easy. I mean, people are looking for a quick fix, I guess, which is why fear doesn't really work because
Right.
it's yeah,
You
but
freeze.
yeah, you freeze.
Mm-hmm.
And with a lot of people, computers aren't really their forte. The
Yeah.
digital landscape is not something they spend a lot of time with or look at. So when they hear people are being attacked and so on and so forth, they don't know what to do and they freeze up and they are afraid.
Right.
Um, yeah, so that's pretty scary attitude, I guess, in and of itself, just to lock up like that. Is this just? I know when people think of computers, they think it's the older generation, people who haven't grown up with computers. Is that what this report has shown? Is it mainly an older generation, or is it
It's
sort of
it's
across the board?
it's both ends of the spectrum. So I like to say it's people like my mom and people like my kids. um, a lot of people that are like sort of working adult age get some form of cybersecurity training or instruction at their place of employment.
Right.
If you're a municipality and you don't, any sort of government entity, and you're not doing cybersecurity training, you really need to. And there's tons of stuff available out there for free.
Okay.
We've got videos. There's training companies that offer. If you're a small organization, they have either free or really reasonable pricing on training. There's really no excuse to not have some sort of cybersecurity training for your employees, um, and I would argue your constituents.
Yeah.
Um, so what we see is that younger people are faster to click on things that
Okay.
might compromise them in some way, but they don't have a lot of assets, right? So what we also see is that older folks who aren't digital natives, they're more suspicious. They move a little slower with the technology, which is to their advantage because they're paying more attention to what they're doing, more so than people like my kids who are just clicking away. But when they get scammed, when they get defrauded, it's for very large dollar amounts. So
Right.
think about things like romance scams of widows or widowers that might take 2 to 3 years to unfold. Somebody grooms that victim for a really long time and
Yeah.
eventually can milk them for their life savings.
Well, and that's
or
the thing.
things like mortgage scams,
Yeah,
where it's somebody a little bit older who might have a very large down payment on a mortgage, and they end up wiring that to somebody who's actually a bad guy, not the mortgage broker or
right.
the title company or any of those
And I
things. So,
believe the city of Ottawa, that the $128,000 I mentioned earlier was over a little bit of time, and that was somebody posing as the mayor or town clerk or something like that, requesting funds over a long
yep,
period of time as well. And
yep.
I mean, for most people, $128,000 isn't a small sum. Even for a city like Ottawa, is still
Hmm.
not a good sum.
Yeah, and I would also say that I know south of the border here in the U.S., I know that for a time there were organizations that really tried to rely on their cyber insurance to
Okay.
cover things like that or things like ransomware. But the rules have really changed, and the insurance companies have wised up, and
Oh,
they have
really?
some pretty high expectations for you before they'll pay a claim. So,
Really?
so you can't kind of be negligent or put your head in the sand, pretend this isn't happening, and then when
Right.
something goes wrong, expect that your insurance is going to pay a claim.
So
So really be careful there.
you've got to show that you've done your due diligence up until this point. You've done training. You've done some of the solutions we're going to talk about a little bit later before your insurance will pay out. I mean, good for them in a way. They can't be paying this all the time, but I remember hearing about one insurance organization paying for an Ontario municipality for their ransomware to get their information back because they didn't have backups, which
Right.
is in of itself another way to get around these things.
Yeah, I think the important thing to know about ransomware before you spend taxpayer dollars paying the bad guys, I
Yeah.
think the thing to really think about is, are we prepared as an organization? So you can
Right.
run something called a tabletop. Doesn't matter how small of an organization you are, how small of a municipality you might be, but just getting all the leadership together, not just technical people, but leadership together around a table, and you practice running an incident. Now, I'll actually tell you about a resource that you can use in Canada, even though it's provided by the U.S. government. So there's an entity known as the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency in the U.S. They're a part of the
Okay.
Department of Homeland Security. And if you go to CISA.gov, CISA.gov,
I'll put
they
that in
have
the show notes.
they have a ton of free resources, and they have templates. So if you don't want to pay, a big consulting company to come in and run a tabletop exercise for you, they have templates in there, and it's basically build your own exercise. So
Oh,
you
cool.
can practice having a ransomware incident. You can practice like, oh, okay, came in through a phishing email or somebody clicked on something. This is what we're seeing in our system. Here's what's happening. What do we do? And so it's really, really, really important that you're prepared. It's also really important that you decide, and I think it's a policy decision and frankly, a moral decision, an ethical decision. Do we want to be an organization that fuels cybercrime and pays criminals for doing this? Because the more we
Right.
pay them, the more they're going to do it. And in some cases, they will even come after a victim a second time because they know
Yeah.
they're going to get paid.
Well, and the
Or
thing is,
they'll
like,
target like victims, right? They'll
if
target
you
other
pay them,
municipalities.
there's no guarantee they're going to release it. They may
Right.
say, "Okay, you need me more. You need more."
Yep. Yep. So
Mm,
we do not advocate for paying them.
no.
And if you make a policy decision that says, as an organization, we are not going to do this, then you have to ask yourself, okay, what do we have to do to not be susceptible to paying, to not have not paying shut us down? Well, then, like you said, you've got to have backups that are properly configured. You've got to do some tabletop exercises, practice having an
Yeah.
incident, and make sure your employees know, shut down their machine, drop off the network, whatever it is, if they
Right.
get sign of ransomware on their machine. So
And in terms of municipalities, with information that's very, very vital and very personal, maybe some sort of encryption as well.
yeah, yeah. I think don't think of it as it's not going to happen to us. It's
Yeah.
it's a it's a when, it's not an if. So
Right.
you're not helpless. It's not hopeless. Like you can
No.
be prepared. You just have to practice. It's like practicing for anything else. You need to have crisis communication statements available so that you can, if it affects the public services you provide, you need to be able to say, if the press starts calling, you need to
Yeah,
have those statements ready because you don't want to be distracted by all that.
exactly.
You want to make sure that you can focus on recovery. And that's really
Right.
what it's about. It's about being resilient and being able to recover quickly.
Right. And I believe, like I mentioned, St. Mary's, Ontario earlier, they did an excellent job with that. Like the news was right on them about personal information, and they were saying, as of right now, no personal information has gone out, no services have been affected. They did a fantastically exactly what you're saying, crisis management. They
Mhm.
did a great job with that, and it's like you said, just like any other crisis.
Right.
Uh, I guess one more question about this report. Have you noticed any specific geographical locations? I know there was another article about southwestern Ontario communities being targeted in Canada. Is there similar areas in, say, the States or the UK that you've noticed?
Yeah, we didn't look at different regions within the different countries, but we do know that Americans are attacked and victimized a lot more than Canadians and Brits. So
I'm
I
gonna
don't know if
with
that's
that.
just a reflection of the size of the
I was gonna
population.
say a larger population, quite possibly.
Yeah.
Your industries as well are a lot larger than ours. And I mean, I
Yeah, and
guess
I think those four countries that I mentioned kind of love to hate us. So we have a giant target painted on ourselves. Yeah.
right. And I mean, it's the same issue up here in Canada too with Huawei. Is we're worried mainly about them getting into our infrastructure and intellectual theft,
Yeah.
uh, things like that.
Yeah, the American government has taken a pretty firm stance against Huawei. If you're using their equipment, I would educate yourself. I would do some reading on some of the recent findings, and I know that there's a push in the U.S. to replace most of that
Right.
equipment. It's
And
very
I know the
purpose
conservative
control.
government up here was pushing to ban them outright. The
Mm-hmm.
liberal government, I believe, has just banned them from our 5G network. We talked a little bit about this off air too,
Mm-hmm.
about, I mean, them being pretty well ingrained into the different countries and the U.S. Like you said, I believe they. Sorry, I'm just trying to get my thoughts. They outright banned Huawei equipment, and ISPs were upset about that
Right.
because they had gone with the
They had
cheaper
come in
equipment.
very low. They were the lowest bidder when ISPs were shopping for new equipment, especially in rural areas,
Right.
and so they went with the lowest bidder, and now they're being asked by the Federal Trade Commission, I believe, to replace that equipment.
Yeah.
So even cheap is not always free, is not always good, right? Free is not always
Right.
free. Cheap isn't always cheap. There's a cost, and the
Right.
cost in this case is national security and our data. I actually heard, I was at a security conference last week, and I actually heard somebody say, just watching what's going on in Russia and the cyber aspect of the war in the Ukraine,
Right.
that that if Russia is a cold or the flu, China's a pandemic. It's yeah. There's a lot of learning happening right now.
Right.
Right. There's a lot of countries in the world that are watching what Russia is doing and what's working and what's not for them.
Well,
And
and that's the interesting thing too about China is they sort of sit in the back and you
mhm.
don't notice them right away, but you see a little poking here and a little poking there. I know on social media, I check out Reddit, I check Imager every once in a while, and you'll see promotions for the Russian war, like from the Russian side, and you're wondering where that comes from. And a lot of the times it is bots,
Yep.
whether it be
Yep.
Russian, whether it be Chinese. I don't know, but um, yeah, it's
No,
definitely
it's
something.
kind of a death by a thousand cuts, I'm afraid.
Right, right,
We're not
right.
paying enough attention to what's happening. Yeah.
But at the same time, I mean, we can't just. I was going to say you can't just outright confront them because geopolitically, I think that would just be
No, I mean, I think we just really have to pay more attention to how we can protect ourselves,
right.
and when something feels too good to be true, when that Huawei equipment was far, far cheaper than everybody else's, then there's probably a reason why. So so I think it's kind of goes back to where we started with general statements about fraud, and one of those statements I would make is, if it feels too good to
Yes.
be true, if it seems too good to be true, then it probably is, and you should walk away.
As with everything in life, if it
Yeah,
feels too good to be true,
yeah,
definitely walk away. One other thing on this, I just wanted to discuss something I saw in the report as well is reporting of cybercrime to authorities. I don't think that's a lot of people think of doing that.
yeah.
Um,
I think well, so phishing has gotten easier to report. Gmail, for example, if you use that in your personal life, they've added a place to report phishing. When
okay,
the email is open and you click on the dots next to more, you'll see not just report spam, but also now it says report phishing. That's
right,
really important. Reporting phishing to your employer, right, to your
right,
municipality or any other organization that you're involved with. And then because that actually goes into, there's actually data analytics that are happening that are watching what those sender addresses are, what those malicious links are, and they're looking at sort of like who are the worst offenders, and that makes them smarter, right? It makes Gmail
yeah,
smarter. When we report a phish that got through one of their filters, right? They have a large security team that's working really hard to keep from getting through to begin with. When one gets through and we report it, then they can block that. So that keeps other people from being
right,
victimized. When it comes to reporting to the government, I think it's the same thing. Like the more we report, in the U.S., it's to the FBI, the Internet Crime Complaint Center. The more we report, we might not hear anything back. You might feel like it's going into
yeah,
the ether somewhere, just into a black hole. But the reality is they're collecting and aggregating that data as well, and they're looking at like, okay, where are our biggest problems? Where are we seeing particular malicious actors that are ramping up their operations, that are getting more and more active, that are doing more and more financial harm? Because
right,
all of the law enforcement globally has limited resources, right?
yeah,
They can't investigate every single scam or fraud. And so they're looking at the ones that are doing the most damage, and they'll go after those folks first, right? I mean, like anybody
right,
else, they have to prioritize. So if the rest of us don't report, then that hinders their ability to be really efficient in law enforcement
yeah.
and try and bring some of these people to justice.
And at the same time, too, a lot of these scams are, I guess, part and parcel with sometimes larger crimes as well
Oh yeah,
that they may be investigating as well, and this is just another
right.
aspect to it.
Yeah, this could just be one way to make money to fuel something else.
Right,
These are large organized crime groups. So you're talking drugs, weapons, human trafficking. Maybe they do some hacking on the side to finance some of their other operations or facilitate
exactly.
some of their other operations. Um, and they do business with each other, just like we do in the legitimate world, right?
Yeah,
So if I'm somebody who is harvesting credit card numbers, then I might partner with somebody who actually has a factory that prints credit cards, and then resells those on the street to other criminals who go out and use them. Um, so these are, they have call centers that they'll outsource to if it's
right.
those annoying phone calls saying that it's the
Air
Inland
duct
Revenue or
cleaning.
whoever. They partner with each other, and they supply each other with different services. And I actually saw this morning one of the marketing emails that one of the criminal organizations sends out to recruit other criminals and to sell
Oh,
their services. And they send
wow,
marketing emails to each other just like we do. So
wow.
just advertising how much money you can make if you partner with them and do whatever XYZ scheme they've got going. But so it's a business to these people. There are people that wake up every day to do this as a business. So
Right.
that's what you're up against. You're not up against the kid in the basement. You're
No,
up
not at all.
against algorithms and artificial intelligence and people that do this for a living.
Right. And I guess in a lot of ways, governments and municipalities, just to sort of circle back into my wheelhouse, those entities seem to be ideal targets with multiple weaknesses to
Mhm.
exploit, large pools of money, sometimes limited resources to prevent
Yep.
attacks. Are there any government organizations you've seen or experienced who are taking the right measures to protect themselves?
Um, yeah, I mean, I think having an incident or two is a huge wake up call. So you do hear those kinds of stories. I'm in the state of Texas, where a friend of
Right.
mine used to be the deputy CISO for the state of Texas. So I believe it was 2 years ago, September, October, there were 16 municipalities and school districts in the state of Texas that got ransomware all within a day or
Oh,
two.
wow. Oh, my
And none
God.
of them paid a dime.
Good.
So you can successfully, you can survive these incidents without paying, giving your money to criminals.
Right.
Um, yeah, I would argue that he was doing some things right that day.
So, what are some of the right things that these school districts in Texas did to not have to pay?
So I think we're going to try and actually get the CISO from the state of Texas and my friend, the ex deputy CISO, on a call to run through it all in detail.
Oh,
So
wow.
I would say to your audience, if they're not in our database, get in our, our database.
Okay.
Just go to staysafeonline.org and sign up to be get our email newsletters. And then when we announce that webinar, you'll see it.
I'll put
So
that in
and
the
we
show
are,
notes.
pardon me.
I'll put that in the show notes for
Yeah,
everybody. This is definitely
yeah,
a site you should check out. And
yeah.
again, if they have any questions, I believe you have a form in there for questions or
We
comments.
do. We do. Or we have an email address, info@staysafeonline.org. Um, so I don't know the details, but I can't wait to find out on the webinar from my
That'll
friend
be
Andy.
that'll be really
And
interesting.
but I would say I'm sure it's things like making sure your backups were properly configured so that they don't also get infected with ransomware.
Right.
That's a biggie. That's where a lot of folks really suffer.
Well, and that's
Um,
the thing with backups too. And I mean, just like as technologically sound as I am, it's always the three backups you want: your computer, an external drive, and a cloud.
right.
So on-site, off-site, and your computer are your three
Yep.
backups.
Correct.
So
Yep.
yeah, and
Yeah.
that would. Sorry,
And
go
then
ahead.
just having a crisis response plan, like
Right.
knowing, knowing, I'm sure they have practiced beforehand and everybody knew what their role was in the moment. That's really important. I
Okay.
know that they do training. I know that there's the state of Texas has a contract that any state entity can use the training that they purchase. So
Oh, wow.
so that might be something that provincial governments want to look at in
That's,
Canada.
that's honestly not a bad idea. That would be
Right.
something. That would be something interesting for the Ontario government to take a look at for municipalities in Ontario, or
Yeah, we actually have
even good roads.
a Canadian company that provides security training that's on our board. They're called Terra Nova, and
Okay,
they're out of Quebec. Um,
interesting.
so they obviously they have everything in multiple languages, and
Right.
but there are lots of options out there, and um, like I said, the pricing is not astronomical,
Yeah.
and sometimes you can get those economies of scale if you do what Texas did and have one contract that's good for
Right.
all the state entities.
Well, I mean, I know for bigger municipalities like Ottawa, Toronto, they have their own cybersecurity. Trying to email some of our board members in Toronto can be quite complicated if you have attachments that they need to sign or something like that. It just don't get through. But for the smaller municipalities, especially when it comes to the financials, some of them just don't have the money for
Right.
big, complicated training and so on and so forth. But I mean,
Mm-hmm.
like you said, it doesn't even have to be big and complicated. It can be simple and like the organization out of Quebec, they're very well priced. But I guess some of the little things too to combat cybercrime is like we said earlier, recognizing when something doesn't seem right. Renewed training, I think, is the big thing too. Like it's one thing to have training once in a while, maybe once a year, but just to keep
That's
up
not
to date
enough.
with that.
Yeah.
No, not at all. Because these scams are
Right.
evolving, they're changing, and these
Exactly.
scammers are getting smarter. I remember, like you mentioned, back in the day, the old Nigerian prince scam, and that's so old and so overdone. It's now a trope unto of itself.
Yep.
Whereas now you're getting emails from Microsoft or calls from Microsoft saying, "Hey, we're Microsoft support," and everything looks legit except for that one little letter.
Right.
So I mean, if you're doing training, that's great. Do more of it.
Yeah, another thing that's really important is multi-factor authentication. So, in your personal
Right.
life and in your work life, making sure that every application you use, every account you have, whether it's social media or obviously your financial services accounts, you want
Right.
all of that to have multi-factor authentication configured on it. And so that's just the thing where you have to prove that you're you in more than one way, right? You might
Yeah,
know a
they'll send you a
password or a
text
PIN.
message.
Yeah, you might get a text or a push notification to an authenticator
Right.
app on your phone, but make sure that's really important. And even things like social media, things that could be used to socially engineer somebody else, right? So if
Right.
you're, or it would be incredibly embarrassing. So there's always cases of somebody's website being taken over because they don't have 2FA on their WordPress account
Right.
and somebody decides to take that over and just serve up porn or something, right? So it's embarrassing and
Right.
it's unnecessary. So even things like your website should be protected with multi-factor authentication.
That's an excellent point, and password managers too. I just wanted to add that in there as
Yep.
well. Like you mentioned earlier, don't have the same password for everything. Um,
Right. And most of us do, and the bad guys
yeah,
know that.
yeah,
Or we make really simple changes that we think are going to trick the bad guys. So it might be password one, password two, password three. We just change the
yeah,
last digit or two. We take a really simple password and then maybe we change some of the letters to numbers, but we don't really make it long enough. And
right,
length and complexity are really important when it comes to
yeah.
passwords and uniqueness. So if I say to you, you can't use the same one twice, and they all have to be truly unique and really long and complex, you're going to say, well, how in the heck am I going to remember all those? And
Well, especially over like 50 different passwords, you've got your banking
exactly,
and social medias,
your
and
average person has over 100, I believe. I saw some
oh
data
my
lately.
gosh,
It's a crazy
wow,
number. So what we recommend then is using a password manager, and
right.
there are quite a few out there. Consumerreports.org reviews them, as does Tom's Guide and other online publications that do technology reviews.
I'm
A
pretty
lot
sure
of them have
Chrome has
really,
one embedded too, right?
yes, yes, a lot of them have really basic free versions. You can pay a little more and have a family account, which is super handy. That's how we arm twisted our kids into using it when they went away to university. We changed the Netflix password. And then they called and
Oh,
said, "What's the Netflix password?" And we said, "Well, if you want the Netflix password, you're going to have to start
yeah.
using that password manager that we told you to
Because
install."
there's no way you're going to
So,
remember this 26 character
nope,
password.
nope. And I'm not texting it to you. So you
No.
can use the password
Oh,
manager.
no, yeah.
So they make it really easy to share things like that within families.
And these are simple things that you can do to keep yourself safe and to keep everybody around you safe as well. Because
Yep.
as we've discussed, like if somebody can get into one of your things, they've got all of your contacts and everybody else that they can
Yep.
now attack, and in an easier way too, because these people already have your or are already trust you, and they see an email
Right.
coming from you, and
Yep.
yeah, that's so
Yeah.
it's little things, it's simple things to keep you safe, and to keep you out of problems like this.
Yeah. I'll give you one more little tip from our website. We have a page with all the popular applications, including social media, and links to where to go to change your security or privacy settings. So
Okay.
if you want to tweak some of those, in other words, how do you go to Facebook and make sure that nobody can see your friend group? Nobody can see who's in your friend group, for example, which we highly recommend that
Right.
you keep that private, things like that. So those can be hard to find because every different application puts them someplace else.
Yeah. Yeah.
So those are so standard there.
Definitely.
So we have on staysafeonline.org, we have a page that shows you, that just has a link to everyone to try and make it easier for you because it's
Okay.
complicated.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, that's awesome. Definitely check it out. Staysafeonline.org. If you're a smaller municipality, if you're just an average person who wants to keep your family safe, check out the website. Check out everything they have to offer you. Even if you're with one of the big municipalities that gives you training every, I don't know, 3 to 6 months, it's never a bad thing to implement this stuff at home and to make sure you personally are safe, because it's going to help you in the workplace and help you not make mistakes that cost your municipality hundreds of thousands of dollars. So,
Yeah, and we've even got content like just a couple weeks ago, we did a webinar on cyberbullying, and we've got tip sheets on what to do
oh,
if you're a kid, if you're a teacher, if you're a school administrator, if you're a parent, if you're an older child, a younger child, how do I handle this? Who do I report to? All those kinds of things. So we do seasonal campaigns like that,
that's
safe
fantastic.
holiday shopping, or, around the
Yeah.
holidays, things like that, to try and
Well,
help companies, municipalities, and consumers.
well, with Amazon days coming up, Black Friday and so on, or Cyber Monday, we got to be safe there too,
Right.
right?
Yep.
Yeah. All right. I know you have a hard out in about 10 minutes, and I don't want to keep you too much longer. So thank you so much for joining us today. I really appreciate it. The insights you brought forward will be a great help to keeping not only municipalities safe, but I hope the people in their everyday lives as well. So, with it being Cybersecurity Awareness Month, are there any pearls of wisdom or anything else you want to leave us with?
Turn on multi-factor authentication on everything that you can. That is key right there. That's my one tip. And if you get a text asking you to click on it to get into your bank account, make sure you were the one trying to get into your bank account. Don't respond to it if you didn't initiate it.
Well,
But
that's the thing too with
MFA is,
banks, banks and everything. They never ever ask you for your password or send
right.
you links to anything. They'll just say go to our website. So, I
Exactly.
mean, it's little things like that that you got to look out for. And I mean,
Right.
those are little things that you stay safe. Those are little things that set off red flags in my head.
Mm-hmm.
And to circle back, and I guess to complete this circle about the social engineering, know the people you're working with and how they're going to ask things.
Right.
When our executive director actually asked me for a favor, I walked to his office and said, "Is this you?" And he's like, "Yes, it is." Okay, it doesn't sound like you. But,
Nope. That's really important. Well, thanks for having me. This was fun today.
all right. Okay, we're going to wrap this up for now. I want to thank you once again for joining us and remind everybody to stay safe out there digitally. Remember, if it seems odd, chances are it's a scam. If it raises red flags, just don't do it. If it's too good to be true, right? There's no harm done by asking someone else, but one website you don't have to worry about is the new goodroads.ca. Our fall and winter education offerings are now available for registration, so check them out under the education section to see how Good Roads can help you succeed in your career. While you're there, have a look at the Career Hub for all of the latest career postings from around the province. And finally, if you have any challenges afflicting your municipality, present it on our Ask an Experts page. If you have questions, we're going to find the answers. Also, be sure to follow us on Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn, and now Instagram for up-to-date information on everything happening at Good Roads. If you're watching this on YouTube, give this video a thumbs up. Remember to subscribe, because it's not just the podcast that goes up here. We offer great content to help you run your municipality as efficiently as possible. And also leave a comment, give us your feedback. It feeds the algorithm, and we love to hear from you. So thanks for hanging out with us, everybody. Now that things have calmed down a bit around here, we'll be dropping podcasts a little bit more regularly, so keep an eye out for that. But until then, everybody, take it easy.